Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. We're back, man.
Yeah.
At least for a week.
Yeah, before you disappear again.
Yeah,
both back from vacation.
Yeah, we are. I've split up my vacation.
So you're doing it in 2 blocks.
Yeah, vacationed last week, came back to work this week, do one more quick week off, and then it's football season, and then we're full go. But how was it without me last week? How'd you guys do?
It was all right. Yeah, we got by. Me and Renner survived.
Yeah, that's good. You talked some college football and draft and stuff.
Some prospects. Renner's been grinding the tape on the college guys.
That's good.
How was part one of the vacation?
It was good. You know, go back to the Boston area where I'm from. We just try to see as many people as possible. Stay at my parents' house or hang out at my parents' house by the pool and actually let people come to us and come visit us.
That's a handy way of doing it.
It is.
That's probably a lot cheaper than the way we did it.
Yeah, so you went to Vegas.
Yes. So
with a 6-year-old.
Yeah. Well, the theory was relatively sound, right? Which is last-minute cheapness Vegas is quite good at because, you know, there's a million hotel rooms there and they're never all full. So you can constantly get pretty cheap last-minute deals. So we got a pretty cheap last-minute thing for the Venetian, which is like a 5-star casino resort thing.
You didn't stay at the Palazzo?
No. But we walked into the Palazzo because they have a good breakfast place there. There's a decent pool there and stuff.
Sure.
But anyway, you're there. They've got a decent pool place, blah, blah, blah. The problem with that is that you're then like locked in to their meal ecosystem, right? Which is, and so obviously you've got the restaurants which are high-end and expensive, but they've got like a food court, the same that you get in the malls. You're like, oh, you just get the cheap food court stuff. No. But it's like 3 times more expensive than a regular. So like Panda Express is like $15 for a, whatever. So
you and I both once spent $15 at Panda Express between the two of us with a voucher.
So anyway, so we did that and we stayed there for a while, but then we also used that as like a jumping off point to various other places in the Southwest. So we went to Monument Valley, the Grand Canyon, Antelope Canyon, all that kind of stuff, apparently it was like 100 degrees there, which was, they were like thanking their lucky stars in the desert as to what a low temperature this was for this time of year. Whereas me, pasty Irishman, is like barbecuing in the desert sun. Jeez. It's not going well. So
you don't handle the sun very well.
I really don't. Having said that, 100 degrees in the desert is way better than like 90 here.
Oh yeah, it is.
Humid.
It's dry.
Way better.
Dry heat.
So when it gets beyond a certain temperature, right, I have reached the point where I'm just like, you know what? I am wearing a sweatband on my head, and I don't care that I look like an idiot. I don't care. Don't care.
Even if you're going to like a nice restaurant or something?
Well, no, because then it's air conditioned. Outside, when it's 100 plus.
Sexist air conditioning?
What? Yes. We're not even touching that. So the problem is, right, my hairline is now receded to the point where if I put on a sweatband here, there's still more head here to get burned. So I now create like a line here where it gets burned back there and here it doesn't, which is not good.
That's rough.
And then this weekend I exacerbated the problem by barbecuing myself in the sun mowing my lawn.
It's because you stopped to take a picture and tweet it out.
I don't think that was the problem. I don't think, given the extent of the sunburn, I don't think that 20 seconds is what tipped it over the edge.
So you've got your own hair issues. I've got a little I've got a debate in my head right now. I'm going back to Boston next week. Do I go back to Steph for my annual haircut? Well, or do I give Katie another shot here in Cincinnati?
It depends what your motivations are, right? If you want to get the haircut that you seem to think is the best one for your head, I love
that you seem to think.
Well, yeah.
Because you'll never agree with one of my haircuts.
You should definitely go back to the woman in Boston. If, however, you want to provide another 24 hours of free entertainment for the office, you should definitely get Steph to have another crack at it.
Well, it's kind of like, do you play the veteran?
No, Katie. Katie's the one here, right?
Katie. So it's like, do you play the veteran or do you let the young guy, figure it out on the fly? I think the long-term play, because I'm going to have to get more haircuts in Cincinnati, Katie's going to need to get trained up in how to cut my hair. I can't always go back to Massachusetts and have Steph cut my hair.
I just think that given Katie's initial efforts, like where she ended up was so far short of the standard required that I can't see the roadmap from her getting to where she started to where she is now.
So just give up on her.
We always like to bring it back to Christian Hackenberg. It's like Christian Hackenberg.
You watched one practice and you knew.
Where you start, from where you are right now, the roadmap between there and viable NFL starter is so far. There's just no way he was ever going to get there.
But Katie had the right mechanics.
Katie's starting point is so far past where you need to be. I just can't see her getting there.
She had good mechanics. She was just inaccurate.
No. That's like he's a 6-frame guy, but the ball's in the stands. Like, no.
6 frames as in quick motion, but he overthrows the receiver.
Right.
Okay.
It may be perfect mechanics right up until the ball leaves his hand. It doesn't go anywhere near the receiver. Like, whatever she was doing may have been technically sound, but it resulted in you looking like Shirley Temple.
Wow.
I mean,
Steph,
you saw the pictures.
Well, then I have to find someone else in Cincinnati, and I'm probably going to go get my hair cut by Steph next week.
I mean, you had a roster of people that sounded like they were qualified in that place.
They gave me Katie.
Well, no. Don't accept the person they give you. Say, there are 3 people that I am prepared to hand over my head to.
Well, now it's even more awkward because she cut my hair. People. She's going to be there, and I'm going to go request someone. I got to go to a whole new place. Go to a whole new place.
Yeah, that is more awkward now.
All right. It's early July. That's where we're. Little banter. People on YouTube hate it. They're just like, fast forward to the 8-minute mark. That's where the football discussion starts.
That's why we put in the timestamps. So you can skip past us being funny.
So 8 minutes of banter and now some football
Right,
talk.
now we can talk NFL.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know.
We're well prepared. We're well prepared for
We're
this.
just do another 30 minutes of bantering out.
Well, so I'm doing this whole How We Grade series over at PFF.com. Did you push how important it is to go to PFF.com rather than ProFootballFocus.com?
No.
PFF.com. We bought it.
We did.
So just use that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So over at PFF.com, we're doing a little How We Grade stuff. And people have been asking for this for a while. I focused more on the visual aspect of it, the examples of what's good and what's bad, just trying to show, hey, these are the things that we give credit for. These are the things we deduct for. We've done other pieces. You and I wrote, I thought, a pretty good piece a couple of years ago on why the QB grading system is so important, why it's crucial, why it adds proper context. That was more word-driven with a few examples. But this was, so far we've done pass blocking, run blocking, passing, and I think coverage is out today. And it just gives some examples of the things we're looking for. I think it helps kind of connect the dots a little bit for people that are wondering where the grades come from.
Yeah, it's a good series. It is. I think it's an interesting thing to dive into that kind of stuff and figure out. There's a lot of people who have been listening to us for a long time and kind of have a pretty good idea of how the system works, but there's a lot of new people that don't have any idea, and these are pretty good places to get started.
Well, even the people that have subscribed or have been with us for a while, I do think it helps. We can't underestimate how difficult it is to wrap your head around all the different details that we take into account and all the different things that we focus on. So even, the most avid PFF fan or user can still use a piece like this to kind of, as a reference point too. In the middle of the season when we have a bad Mitch Trubisky grade out there, you just go back to our passing grades and say, hey, I wonder what he did that looks like some of these passes in the last week or so. One of my favorite examples was in the passing breakdown. It was actually Trubisky and Foles. And it was the same game as divisional round. And it was literally the same exact throw. They both made an ill-advised pass in the red zone into the end zone right at the safety. And Foles had it intercepted and Trubisky had it dropped. And that was a perfect example of same PFF grade. I think it was a minus 1.5 for both guys, just as bad as it gets, turnover-worthy play style. Not as bad as it gets, minus 2 still out there. But pretty bad, completely different results. One's 0 for 1, one's an interception. That's the level of context we're bringing every single
Those are fun because there are people out there that complain about this idea of, you're just grading what ifs. Like, what if the play had been picked
No, we're
off? Grading
what he did.
Right. It's like the point is it's the same play. Yeah. It's exactly the same play. We're not... Why would you change the exact same play based off whether the guy caught it or not?
Right. And
it's not. His throw is the same. That's what we're grading. We're grading what that guy did, not the result at the end, which is determined by something else. Right. Now, statistics go by what happened, right? They go by the result of the play, which is more than one thing, all being rolled into one. But the point of the grading is to try and separate all that out and compartmentalize who did what.
Right.
So when we're grading people, we're not necessarily focused on the results because you need other people to bring in, to come together to create that resultant stat. we're not focused on that when we're talking about grading. We're just talking about what did that guy do. So when that guy puts the same exact throw in the end zone in a defender's hands, we're going to grade it the same whether he catches it or not.
And then the context that comes out of that is if you have a guy that has a whole bunch of turnover-worthy plays and he doesn't have a ton of interceptions, it tells stories. And that's what we do here is we tell the stories that say, hey, look, Derek Carr's got this incredible interception streak, but he had like 3 -2 throws along the way that were dropped or whatever it is, right? So we just bring context to the numbers, and that's what the grades are able to do. And then, of course, I always like to say that the grades are descriptive and predictive, Sam.
You do.
I do like saying that because George and Erica found that the grades are like the secret sauce when it comes to predicting games and predicting future performance. We had a feeling for years, but they've started to actually quantify it and say the grades are the most important thing because it does, at its core, focus on the consistent stuff that the player can do, not the outside factors. So what they've essentially said is, good job by the graders. And this is despite everyone's, the general question, the question that I would ask too. What about the fact that you don't know the play call? That there are gray areas, that there are all these different things, right? And that's what our data guys would say. That's a little bit of noise, right? Because no statistic is 100% correct. And even if we're 85% correct, it's still extremely valuable, and it's still more valuable than just using, say, touchdowns or interceptions.
Right. That's the key, I think, to all of this is that none of us at PFF are going to claim that we get everything right. We don't. Yeah. Nobody does. We're not 100% on any of this stuff. We obviously try and get as close to 100% as humanly possible, and we'll try and get better every single year and try and get closer to 100% as we can. But we know it's probably never going to happen because why would it? You're not in the room. You don't know specific weird calls that will surface every now and again. But we are closer to 100% than anybody else out there because of the system, because of the fact we're doing it every single play, because every single game gets gone through multiple times. All of these safety checks and balances we put in get us closer to 100% than anybody else. So you can go out there, you can find a play that we screwed up, and you can say, well, PFF is clearly bull because of this. Don't listen to anything they have to say. Or you can say, all right, that's one of the ones we screwed up. That is in our margin of error somewhere. It's a mistake. But despite that margin of error, all of this stuff comes out to being proven predictive, to being proven to have tighter correlations to winning and to future predictability than anything else out there. Because fundamentally, it's a more sound starting point. And even if you can't, we've always had this approach that even if you can't get perfect, you can still get to really good and better than other people.
Yeah. So another way of looking at it too, our fantasy guys have done a really good job, or a lot of the fantasy guys in general say, look, you can't just say, well, Patrick Mahomes had 50 touchdowns last year, therefore he's going to get, he'll regress to only 48. Like he might regress pretty bad to 30, which is a really good season still, because you're looking at, of his 600-something throws, you're focusing on 50 of them, which is really small. And of course, there's going to be a bigger margin of error to duplicate that exact number. But when you're grading every player on every play, you might have 1,000 plays to choose from or 800 plays to choose from. So you've got just this bigger sample size of plays, a bigger sample size of actual grades versus actual statistics, which, by nature just become smaller sample sizes. So I've enjoyed putting this series together, putting examples together, going through all of our play-by-play grading and saying, here's something that we called a big-time throw or a turnover-worthy throw or a great play in coverage or still a good play in coverage, and there are different levels of all this stuff. The one other thing I'll say, and the thing that we hear quite a bit, especially with offensive line play, is, well, the coaches know better than you because they're grading their plays. I care about my coach's grades more than I care about PFF. And our rebuttal to that is always, first off, they're going to weigh things a little bit differently. We have a 0, which is expected, that they might call good. So you get this little disparity. But I think the biggest thing here, when the O-line coach for, say, the Vikings is grading his players on a Monday morning, he obviously has no clue how they're doing in relation to all other 31 teams. He only knows how well they carried out their assignments for the Minnesota Vikings that particular day.
That's big.
With his own biases. But we're able to add the league-wide view. So again, even if we miss an assignment here and there, we've got a league-wide view, so we can tell you that this left guard, while you think he's bad, he's actually average compared to the league or whatever it might be.
That's huge. That's a big thing. But I think that 0 is also a huge part of all this. Excuse me a moment.
Yeah, the expected grade, and zeros are different based off of, I think you muted, but I think you
Still came through.
It was a good sneeze.
It was a good sneeze.
Yeah, you got to get it in there.
So I think the 0 is really important because it adds this layer of nuance that isn't there without it, right? This idea of you either did good or you did bad. I mean, it's just phrasing it like that. It's a fundamentally blunt way of, determining things. There's more grades than that. So with us, I mean, we have more than that as well because there's 0.5, 1, 1.5,
there's levels of good.
But let's say we just had plus, minus, and 0. Adding that 0 is huge because there are a bunch of plays where, okay, your guy did his job, but his job was basically the same as the guy he was trying to block, right? Both of them were happy with the outcome of the play. They essentially both wanted to occupy the B gap. Right. And that was job done, right?
Yep.
So sure, your guy made his block, but he made his block. You could have made the block because the guy he was blocking was happy to be in that gap as well. So they basically just both stood there and went, job done, we're happy. Yeah. So an offensive line coach goes in there and goes, yep, job done, tick, positive.
And the defensive coach goes in and says, yep, positive.
And we're like, well, okay, so both those guys get a 0 because you expect it. Right. Nobody's trying to do anything different to what actually happened there. So nothing other than that would happen on that play. So being able to add that layer of context, this idea of both these guys are happy, it's not really a positive play because, anybody could do it, is huge. It's a big difference because a lot of those plays exist. And being able to sort of add that layer of differentiation between the guys that are actually generating positive blocks because they're doing something other than the guy they're blocking is trying to do.
Right.
Or the guys that basically just had a ton of plays where everybody was happy to occupy the same space. It's important to differentiate between those two things. We're able to do it. Anybody with just a plus or a minus system isn't.
Right. And even if they are using levels of pluses and minuses, still I think it's that connection with what the rest of the league is doing.
Yeah,
we've had multiple conversations with teams where they're like, oh, you overgraded our right guard, and we come back and say, well, you should see the rest of the right guards. You guys are, and the more you talk to coaches, it's funny because they have this small window in the offseason where they try to learn new things. And we see that a lot of coaches come in through the PFF offices, especially when they're in between jobs. And, some of the coaches have been with the same team the last 15 or 20 years, and they're no longer coaching for whatever reason. And a lot of them are going on like little tours, like, hey, I'm going to go watch this team down here. I'm going to go watch these guys practice. That's their way of kind of like learning new things. Coaches have this couple-month window where they're not so laser focused on the season. When they're in the season, all they're focused on is, let me grade the last game real quick and let's get on to the next team. We got a game plan. We have to prep our guys. We have to be ready to go. And it's just this constant, next team, we're on to Cincinnati moment for all of them. That's how every coach handles it. They don't have time to figure out what is happening around the rest of the league. They don't have time to really gauge that. And they really don't even have time to maybe even gauge their own players' performance and say, well, our right guard's struggling right now. Well, we don't have a backup, so we got to go. We got to figure out how to make him better.
Yeah, I mean, that whole, the wider context of how the rest of the league is in a specific area is a really important thing. And even if, it happens internally as well. You're like, well, everybody agrees that our right guard is terrible, right? Having said that, he is easily the best right guard on this roster, and there are no obvious alternatives available, either inside or in free agency. So everything requires that extra layer of context, right? It's like, yes, this guy sucks, but I don't have a better option. We're stuck with him, so we got to make the best with what we have. You also see it with fans all the time. It's like, we have the worst offensive line in the NFL. It's like, no, your offensive line is definitely subpar, but have you seen the Arizona Cardinals?
Right.
Because until you have last year, you probably can't talk about having the worst offensive line in the NFL because they have it locked up.
We dealt with that with Eagles fans the year that they won the Super Bowl, because that offseason we said that they had the best offensive line in the NFL. In week 1, Carson Wentz gets sacked, and it's like every Eagles beat writer and radio host is like, oh, yeah, PFF, great offensive line. And it's like, okay, you're still the best offensive line in the NFL. You're going to give up some sacks.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect.
Right. And they did have the best offensive line in the NFL that year.
Yeah, so I mean, all these things are big. And in order to, you may have an idea of how good or bad this thing is, but without understanding how the rest of the league looks, you don't know where to place it.
So context, I think, is extremely important. Really excited about these pieces that explain how we grade, give some more examples. Let us know what you guys think of them. If you've got the right detail in there, I can add some stuff to it if you guys have specific questions. But of course, the outputs for all this stuff, all a part of Premium Stats. It's PFF Elite season, Sam. This is when everybody comes running for their PFF Elite. I saw some great feedback on Twitter. Some woman was talking about how it was like the greatest purchase she's ever made.
Yeah, nice.
She was very excited
Sweet.
about it. So I retweeted it or I liked it or something. But this is generally the season people come running for PFF Elite for your fantasy needs, for just your general football needs.
And we're about to drop the fantasy draft guide right now.
Oh,
today,
really?
I think today. So yeah, this is basically the start of our big sale season. So get in if you're a fantasy fan right now. You'll get the Jeff Ratcliffe's version 1 of his draft guide. I think there's going to be a couple of iterations as we go, but this is the first version. You want to hit some mailbag questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you have the list?
I tweeted last night asking for some questions. There's a lot of stuff in here we're not going to talk about, but there's some good questions. Which is this?
I think they asked about the pay structure for the men's and women's.
Yeah,
US
so we're not going to talk about that.
Soccer/football team.
We are instead going to talk about, this one is from a guy called CeeLo, whose actual at name. Which one are you supposed to give? The display name or the actual at? Whatever.
At fan of the game?
Yeah, at fat_of_the_game.
Go with CeeLo.
Okay, CeeLo says, what will the Bruce Arians / Todd Bowles additions mean for Tampa Bay? You
chaos.
like this.
It means
you
chaos.
like this because this is going to be your year.
This is Jameis's
If it doesn't
breakout
happen
year.
this year, you're done.
This is it. Okay, what do the additions mean? It means excitement in chaos.
Okay.
Because you have, first off, Bruce Arians, the guy who's going to throw the ball down the field more than any play caller in the NFL.
Yeah.
Jameis's average depth of target is going to be like 15 yards. The leader's usually at 10. He's going to be at 15. The leader's generally Jameis.
Yeah.
It's going to be even further. There's going to be touchdowns. There's going to be 5,000 yards passing probably. There's going to be a ton of interceptions. And then on the other side, you got Todd Bowles, who's going to play a ton of man coverage and just blitz like crazy. There was a game a couple years ago, Jets versus Dolphins, when he'd just taken over the Jets, and he went zero blitz, as in blitz everybody, have zero safety help, and just have man coverage across the board. They did it like 22 times against Ryan Tannehill. That was my boy Fitzpatrick told me that. I mean, we saw it, but Fitzpatrick told me this story because, my old colleague. But he was saying how that was a great way to kind of like capture the locker room in Game 4 of the regime of Todd Bowles with the New York Jets, and he's just going crazy. He's just saying, hey, they can't handle our zero blitz. We're going to come after it. So it's going to be downfield passing with a good group of playmakers, big playmakers. It's going to be highly volatile Jameis becoming even more volatile potentially, and it's going to be Todd Bowles taken a Tampa team who is historically, more zone heavy. Not that they always run this Tampa 2 just because they're in Tampa, but historically they've had these zone heavy type of systems and coaches, and it's going to be a lot more man coverage, a lot more pressure on the secondary, and a lot more volatility from a defensive perspective, which means when you have that type of style, you could put up a ton of points, create a ton of turnovers, or it could go completely haywire.
Yeah. So This is really interesting because, you for years have been convinced that Jameis Winston is going to put it all together one year and you're going to get MVP Jameis and he's going to look like an all-pro. I've, for the same amount of time, been telling you that it's never going to happen. But this, if it's ever going to happen, it's going to be this year, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be this year because Bruce Arians could be there for 3. It could be any time in the next couple of years.
If it's ever going to happen, it's going to be with this combination.
Okay.
So Bruce Arians has, obviously a history of excellent quarterback play with places he's been. He's had Ben Roethlisberger. He's had year 1 of Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck in 2012. Yep.
Carson Palmer's MVP caliber season in Arizona was Bruce Arians. So he's been able to get these high levels of performances out of quarterbacks with this system that goes deep more than anybody else, with this system that attacks deep down the field, which plays into the strengths of a guy like Jameis, who, as you say, is typically the guy leading the average depth of target charts, or at least at the very top. What's kind of interesting to me is that he's he's typically, it doesn't have the same level of turnover-worthy plays or interceptions you would expect for that kind of system, right? Or particularly Jameis, is it's high volatility. You're going to get a ton of big plays, a ton of mistakes as well.
Right.
But Carson Palmer's crazy season threw 11 interceptions. Like, that's not a high total for a guy who's living intermediate and deep.
Well, they all came out in the playoffs.
Yeah, okay. The playoffs are bad.
And I know he was a little banged up or whatever, but he had a high number of turnover-worthy plays. But that was an incredible season.
Right,
Palmer
but proportionally, there's no more than you would expect from Carson Palmer, right?
True.
Particularly given that you're now increasing his average depth of target and you're asking him to do harder things.
Right.
Roethlisberger's interception rate with Arians there wasn't higher. In fact, if anything, it was lower than it's been the rest of his career. Again, a guy who's sort of high variance, right? You get a ton of big-time throws, you get a ton of interceptions and turnover-worthy plays. Arians seems to be able to do this thing where he increases the difficulty and aggression of the offense by going deep without increasing the amount of mistakes it generates.
Yeah.
Which for Jameis would be huge, right? Because, all right, if you just expand the poles of what he does and make him even more aggressive and prone to big plays, but even more prone to crazy interceptions, that's probably not helping.
Yeah,
but if we're able to increase the big stuff without increasing the bad plays, like, that's what propels Jameis into good rather than just crazy volatile.
The part of his volatility isn't just turnover-worthy plays, though it's just misses. It's just inaccurate misses. And that's the same type of profile that a Cam Newton has, that a Carson Palmer has, right? And that's the type of profile that if you get the right playmakers and aggressiveness behind them, the positives can go through the roof. They already have good positives, but they could go through the roof, as in adding value on plays, converting third downs. Like that year that Carson Wentz had the crazy third down conversion rate, which is very difficult to sustain. Mm-hmm. You could see Jameis Winston being that guy in a given year that puts together an incredible third down rate, especially when you throw into Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate. You've got all these different playmakers, good size guys that can stretch the field. That's what you're getting. Like, one of these years, that stuff comes together with Jameis, even if he misses a ton of throws, because, even Cam in his MVP season still missed a ton of throws.
Right.
But it was all the value that he added that made him MVP caliber.
Yeah. So if it's going to happen, it's going to be with this combination, but it's probably not going to happen.
Well, it's interesting because this is Jameis's 5th year now. Mm-hmm. We get the 5th-year option and all that stuff.
First quarterback to play through the 5th-year option. Him and Mariota.
Yeah.
First quarterbacks to ever do it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, given that everybody obsesses over getting the 5th-year option. These are the first two guys to ever actually play it out.
Well, those were that was the time when everybody said, what does the post Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, Manning at the time, what does the era look like? What does quarterback play look like in the NFL when those guys are gone, and all of them are still here except for Peyton? But since that time, we've gotten Jameis and Mariota, who are reasonable starters. We've gotten Goff, Wentz, Dak. We've gotten Mahomes, Trubisky, Baker, and Deshaun Watson. And we've gotten Baker and the rest of his class. We've gotten a bunch of guys who are reasonable to good starters in the NFL since that point. So
I wasn't trying to perpetuate the conversation. I just found it interesting that they're the first two to play out the 5th year.
Oh, no. I stretched it out.
All right, you kept going. So this is easy to be flippant with this one, right? But I actually want to use this to have a serious conversation briefly.
Boy.
This one is from Daniel the Chad Jones, apparently. Why do the Giants keep Eli Manning?
I will not be flippant.
Yeah, good. Don't. Because, they have reasons. They are difficult to see for a lot of people. What are they?
So there is a comfort level with what you know. Even if what you know isn't that good, there's a comfort level with what you know. Mm-hmm. Then there are things like statistics, which we're not a stat-based company. We're a grading-based company that also produces stats, and our grading provides context to traditional stats. So someone like Pete Prisco the other day puts out a statement that says, and he wasn't trying to say Tom Brady equals Eli Manning, but he said statistically Brady and Eli had similar years last year, right? And his whole point was to try to say, don't say that Drew Brees is going to regress because people think that Brady regresses. His whole point was basically that stats can fluctuate a little bit year to year. I think he was trying to make that nuanced point. our point in that whole thing is that, well, Brady was a top 5 quarterback in our grades. Eli was in the 20s for like the 5th straight year. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the grading is the most valuable component. Eli had garbage time stuff, interception luck, fumbles that aren't included there, all these different things that say, okay, this 92 passer rating is not the same as that 92 passer rating. But if you're the Giants, I think based off what I've heard Dave Gettleman say, you see a guy that put up decent stats last year, though again, with no context to the rest of the league. Even his good stats weren't even in the top half of the league.
Right, it was like a record year for passing.
Right. It wasn't even the top half of the league statistically. If you're using throw-by-throw context, he wasn't a top 20 quarterback, again, for the 5th straight year. And there's just this comfort level in... Oh, no. The third part is, well, we watched him at camp, right? He can make NFL throws. So it's kind of like when you're evaluating a prospect, when you say... Look at those throws. Look at that deep out. Look at that comeback. Look at that seam route. Eli can make NFL throws, but I don't think there's a grasp of what he can do versus the other 32 quarterbacks. He is in the bottom third of the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL for the 5th straight year.
Yeah, so I think there's also an element to once we build this thing around him, he'll look better. Like he's come when we took over this thing, bad offensive line, bad defense, bad receivers ish. This whole idea of he hasn't had much to work with, right? And once we give him all this stuff to work with, he'll look a lot better because it's Eli Manning. We know he's better than this. So I think there's a bit of that, and then there's this inbuilt idea of we saw him be a huge part of this team winning 2 Super Bowls, making some crazy plays in the most critical times possible. If we can just put him in that position again, we'll see he'll come back. Right? That guy didn't disappear. He's still there. So I think it takes a lot for a guy to walk away from that, having seen that twice. Right. It takes a lot for a team to just go, you know what, that's not happening again. Bye-bye. And then I think there is a big part of this idea of, well, everything around him was bad, so how could he look good? If we just create this situation around him, he'll look great. And then obviously the counterpoint to that would be, the same thing would be true for pretty much any quarterback you can put back there, given the situation he's currently playing in.
That's a good point. I think that does play heavily, especially the offensive line component. They haven't had a good line for a while, so it's easy to make the excuse, well, what about the supporting cast? I do think playmaker-wise, though, when they had Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, they had a nice little group of playmakers.
It was definitely heading in the right direction before the Odell Beckham thing.
So those are the reasons why the Giants are sticking with Eli Manning. I'll finish it with this. It's the fear of the unknown. We've talked about this with the Dak Prescott thing. If you can take the macro view and say, Dak Prescott's the 15th to 20th best quarterback in the NFL, how truly difficult is it to find a replacement? And then for what you'd have to pay him, where's the value there? Could you draft a Dwayne Haskins hypothetically, get the same type of output, and get it for a fraction of the cost? Same thing you could say for Eli Manning. It's the fear. How difficult is it to find the 22nd, 23rd, 24th best quarterback? They could have flipped Eli Manning for Joe Flacco, say.
Particularly now, the landscape changes, right? If you go back a few years, it actually looked pretty hard to find that. And that's why you had those Alex Smith contracts. This idea of being 15th is actually really valuable because the difference between 15 and 25 is a serious gulf. Now it isn't. Now we've had enough guys come into the league where 25 and 15 are pretty much the same guy almost.
That's what being able to replace that. 8 to 10 starting quarterbacks come in the last few years.
So a few years ago, I get it. A few years ago, I understand this idea of, well, okay, he's not great, but we can get a lot worse pretty quickly. Now I don't know that you can. It seems to be relatively easy to plug in 25 and not have to worry about it. It's getting to 7 that's the issue. I said
Joe Flacco, but you realistically, for a fraction of the price, could have gotten, say, Case Keenum.
Right. In that system as well.
In that system with Shermer, right? And you get it's similar production to, say, Eli Manning. But more realistically, you want to get a rookie like a Daniel Jones or a comparable player and or better player. But you get a rookie contract quarterback.
Do you see Daniel Jones' Madden rating, by the way?
No, what is it?
It was lower. Who do you think it would be lower than this rookie class?
It's lower than everybody in the first round, I assume.
Oh, the first round. Yeah, keep going.
Is it lower than Deontay Johnson or something?
Stick to quarterbacks for the moment. How bad a quarterback do you think has a higher rating than Daniel Jones?
Who was in this draft? So Drew Lock's higher than him.
Yeah.
In the second round. Ryan Finley's higher than him.
Don't know. There's a bunch that I'm not going to know between the ones in the first round. Tyree Jackson has a higher.
Come on.
Rating than Daniel Jones.
Why?
I have no idea.
I'm no huge Daniel Jones fan, but he's better than Tyree Jackson.
He really is. I mean, that's harsh. Like, whatever about rating him below, Kyler Murray and Haskins and that kind of stuff. But below Tyree Jackson is ridiculous.
Ouch. Yeah, that's rough.
So, Madden, I mean, come on. You guys have made a mess there. You're making a point, and you've taken it too far, and now you owe somebody an apology. That's all I'm saying.
There's just no nuance to anything here. Daniel Jones completed 17 checkdowns at training camp and OTAs or whatever, and everybody's like, see, looks the part. He's looking great.
What was interesting is, interesting by Madden rating standards, is Kyler Murray is way behind what Baker was a year ago. And we've kind of made the point all along that, he's not Baker, but he's kind of close.
Yeah.
We got one more question before I want to do something fun at the end of it.
Oh, God.
This one's from Count Mo.
Okay.
Debate the value of left tackle versus right tackle based on the fact that the best pass rushers typically go against right tackle, but most quarterbacks are blind to their left. And also for left-handed quarterbacks, wouldn't right tackles be more valuable inherently? And our team's utilizing this.
All right. I wrote about this back in 2013. This is one of my favorite things. So thanks for asking.
And we've dug into it a little bit more recently as well. So we can do a nice little segment here.
Okay. Let's start by me explaining that the blind side is not even real. There's no such thing as the blind side, because if I drop back as the quarterback and I turn, of course, technically it looks blind. But as soon as I start to throw left, I turn to throw left, the right tackle is now protecting my blind side.
This got a surprising amount of pushback when I was making this point on Twitter. People don't seem to understand this concept that if you drop straight back and look there, I have no earthly idea what's happening back here. The right side, the open side, is now blind. You don't feel what's coming there because you can't see it. And the point is, people are like, minimizing. You can see weekly guys getting cleaned out from this side who don't see it coming.
From the front side.
From the front side.
And I always make my funny tweet. I said, he got blindsided.
Right.
And everybody's like, that's not the blind side. I mean, that's my point. When you get hit, when the right tackle gives up a pressure and you get popped, and I'm looking left. Here I am looking left, and I don't know if I've got to invert it for the camera, but I'm looking to my left, and I get popped from the right side. I can't see it because I'm looking left. So then the question is,
people need to understand that. If we can't agree on that, we probably can't have this discussion. But, you talk to Zach Robinson, you talk to Bruce Gradkowski, quarterbacks that have played at the highest level, and they will tell you if you're looking over there is blind.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's your open side as opposed to your technical blind side. It's blind. You don't see what's happening. So if the right tackle gets roasted and Von Miller is steaming around the edge, you don't know about it until he drills you.
Exactly.
So we need to accept that as a fundamental fact.
So that's our baseline, that the blind side changes. Okay? When I look left, the blind side's protected by the right tackle. If I'm looking down the middle, it's truly even.
Right.
You've got enough vision both ways peripherally. And then if I'm looking to the right, then the left tackle's protecting my blind side. The next question is, how often do quarterbacks throw left, middle, and right? Or where do their reads start, so to speak? And I think people tend to think, well, righties like to throw to their right. And I think that's one of those youth football things, right? Like a youth football quarterback or a high school football quarterback, yes. In the NFL, it's pretty evenly dispersed.
And it used to be more right in the NFL.
It used to be.
It's shifted more evenly now with all this spread offense and quarterbacks spending their lives in the shotgun, so they're automatically, you know what I mean?
Right.
They're not dropping back and taking their eyes off the quarterback as much. So you go back 10 years, it was more heavily slanted towards the right. That's why the best cornerbacks always played left corner, because quarterbacks did target that side more often.
Right.
Now, not so much.
Now they work the left side as well as the right side. So therefore, the blind side is evenly dispersed. Mm-hmm. Then you get the question about where the best pass rushers lining up, and that is where you get your Von Miller, Khalil Mack for the most part. You have all of these best rushers. The Boses are both, Joey Bosa's been over there. Justin Houston was over there for so much.
We should actually tally those up at some point. X number of the top 10 are,
Yeah. Well, so here's the point that I started to make, right? So you used to look at the left tackle and say, well, he's got the toughest job versus the right tackle. We actually need to flip it and say that their jobs are about equally difficult. The guy that has the tough job is the right defensive end. That's your Olivier Vernon. It's Myles Garrett. It's the guy that lines up at right end every single time, because the NFL, and I don't necessarily disagree with this. You know, if you've got 2 tackles, you say, oh, I'm just going to put my better one at left tackle. That's fine. But the NFL still puts their best tackle at left tackle. Therefore, the right defensive end has the most difficult job when it comes to the pass rush, pass block interaction, because he's generally facing better tackles if you don't flip sides. So instead of saying the left tackle has the most difficult job, it's actually not true. It's the right defensive end that has the difficult job rushing the passer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a degree to which those blindside hits that you simply don't see even developing, let alone coming, there are more of those coming from the left side than the right side because of your orientation, right? So even if you're dropping back, you're typically sort of slanted towards the right-hand side.
Right.
So even if your head is facing directly down the middle, you're leading more to the left blind than you are the right.
Sure.
Now, if you're looking left, obviously that pivots around, and what was your blind side is now kind of looking either straight back or more to the right-hand side anyway. So that's blind. But I think overall there are more of those hits that are going to come from the left than the right. And the reason those are important is those are the hits that force fumbles.
And it's true. But there's a handful of plays per year.
Yeah. It's small margins, but for no other reason. That's why I think I would still stick with this idea of if I've got one elite pass blocker, you keep him at left tackle, because the more of those plays are the strip sack, the ones you don't see coming, the ones that can cause turnovers, and that's the fundamental reason why edge pressure is more valuable than interior pressures, because they force more fumbles.
Yeah, and they happen more often.
Right, so those are the things that you should be trying to prevent the most.
Right.
So whether, it may be marginal gains to put them on the right side if there's more pressure there, but those are the ones that will create those blindside hits and the strip sacks because of it.
So here, the question was also, how's the NFL dealing with this? I think some teams are starting to put more money to the right tackle, which is fine. There are also still some teams that will pay $15 million for a left tackle and just put anyone at right tackle. And I know it's not always simple economics. You don't always have the opportunity to say $8 million for this guy, $8 million for that guy. But I think the idea of bridging the gap is important. I also think the work that Eric and George have just done recently to kind of confirm what we've been saying on the podcast. How many times have we said creep back toward average, right? The idea of creeping back toward average is saying, give me 5 guys who are close to league average, and that is extremely valuable in the NFL from a pass protection standpoint. And the difference between those guys and a bad offensive line is massive, but the difference between the average team and the elite team is small. So do you truly need an elite left tackle? No. You're better off actually having a good left tackle and a good right tackle. It's extremely important. Again, if I had 2 guys to choose from, I'd put the better guy at left tackle. But, what I don't like is, when Jason Peters gets hurt and the Eagles say, well, time to move Lane Johnson over to left tackle. There is that transition period to move a right tackle to left tackle, even though over time I think they're fine. I don't think you have to take a guy to go replace the left tackle. You just keep Lane Johnson at right tackle and you put the next guy in at left tackle.
And the interesting thing is that a lot of this stuff can be backed up with PFF data, facts, right?
Yes.
I can't remember the exact set of filters I used, but looking at essentially using our quarterback charting stuff, we're able to sort of tell you where the guy's first read was, where he was looking on the field.
It's just where he was looking at the top of his drop.
Right. So we filtered out play action because that makes a mess of stuff. We made it sort of obvious passing situations essentially. And if you look at that league-wide, quarterbacks look first to their left more than they're looking first to their right. So that idea of when you're looking left, your blind side flips to the right-hand side happens more often than it doesn't.
Right.
Now, that's not clean because, if you read left, middle, right, you may end up with the blind side being on your left when it starts. The whole thing flips during the course of the play. Like it's not even on this play it's left, on this play it's right.
And that pushes the idea of equal importance.
On this play it started left and then progressed to the right-hand side the longer the play went on.
Right.
And, the longer the play goes on, the more there is a chance of pressure arriving. So the later in the play, it may have flipped side to the more important side. But anyway, so even if you just look at that stuff, you can basically manufacture the blind side being the other side than the way you think it is on more plays when it comes to obvious passing situations than not. So it's a really important thing to understand that your blind side isn't just the left for a right-handed quarterback all the time.
And the one other thing that we eliminate in all this is rollouts, because a rollout, granted, most quarterbacks will roll out to their right, but once you have that play action, boot action, or whatever it is, the tackles are pretty much irrelevant anyway, because you're not really in pass protection. You're worried that, you're just hoping on the defenders having misdirection. And if you roll away from the left tackle, it doesn't matter who your left tackle is. I could block that because my guy's not giving up pressure. On a rollout to the right, that's on the quarterback. If anything, the right tackle slightly more important because he's got to at least get in somebody's way.
Yeah.
The left tackle could completely whiff on the backside of a boot.
Yeah, Greg Robinson.
Not that you want him to.
All right, so let's finish this with the fun thing, which we have 3 minutes to do. So it's going to be a modified fun thing.
Okay,
right?
Quick fun.
So this guy was basically asking about how would PFF likely rate some of the all-time greats? Staubach, Bradshaw, Kelly, Montana, Young, Cunningham, LT, the original, Reggie White, Collinsworth, obviously. So what's going to have to happen in this limited time frame is you're going to have to give me one human being from previous NFL eras that you would love to see PFF grade and how you think they do. Go.
Mark Brunell, my favorite player of all time.
You put out Mark Brunell. That's everybody who you want to see the PFF grade on.
And he would have been good.
Good. Mark Brunell, good.
I love him, but he'd only be good. How about Tony Baselli from that same era?
Would Mark Brunell be better than David Garrard?
Yeah, I think he would be.
Yeah?
Step above Garrard.
Okay.
Jimmy Smith. And so the more I watch Brunell,
I love to see grades on Jimmy
Smith.
Jimmy Smith is so good.
I'll send you the highlight package I saw on YouTube. It was every time there was press coverage on Jimmy Smith, Brunell was throwing the deep ball.
Jimmy Smith might be the most underrated wide receiver in NFL.
Most underrated receiver in history. Can I say, let me just say, legitimately, LT, I think probably would have been, yes. Lawrence Taylor, not LaDainian.
Yeah.
Lawrence Taylor, I think, would have been dominant. I think he would have lived up because he also had a few plays in coverage and stuff. Like he just had those elite big plays, Khalil Mack style.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that has a lot of, when you're the first guy to come along that does something different, the league isn't prepared to stop it, right? So you're working with the idea of the kind of like the thing trying to prevent you being you. It doesn't exist yet, so you're going to look great. I would really love to see us grading Deion Sanders for a few seasons. Yeah. Because one, I think we would dispel this idea of shutdown. Right. Like I've seen some Deion games against Jerry Rice, and he gives up a lot of catches for a guy that never gave up a catch. Or should have given up more, but Steve Young was missing Jerry Rice inaccurate. So I think, we would dispel this idea that, Deion basically never gave up anything ever. Right. But I'd be really fascinated where he fits alongside, Sherman, Rivas, those great seasons and that kind of thing. I think you'd probably get a season that was absurd like Rivas, but I think there'd be a lot that were just like, good. So Marino, of course. 84 I would love Marino. 84 Marino, but all Marino too. I think the old NFL would have, so like if you have 40 big time throws in a year right now, that's really good. I think you would have seasons back then where guys had like 55, 60 big time throws because there was so much downfield throwing, but far fewer just positives in general. So you'd have like 60 big time throws, 20, 25 turnover-worthy throws. Well, that's like Namath's career. Yeah. They'd be like, well, that'd be ridiculous. Right. Yeah. They'd be like even big-time throws to turnover, and there'd be no 0.5s anywhere. But I would love to see, the QB grading distribution would be so different back then with the downfield passing attacks. All right. There we go. Fun done. Oh, man, I could have done a whole podcast on that. No, I know. That was fun. Yeah, that's why we had to limit it. All right. So there you have it. It's the PFF NFL Podcast. Like we said, it is PFF Elite season, so get to PFF.com, grab your elite subscription, because if you guys are playing fantasy, the fantasy guide is out. If you guys just love premium stats and all of this data, it's all there, part of PFF Elite. We'll talk to you. Well, I'm going to be on vacation again next week, so you guys have at it next week. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.